Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us for the fifth session of Creators Arena, brought to you by Creators of Product. Today we welcome Rahul Ganjoo, who is currently the head of product at one of the most iconic consumer tech product in the country, Zomato. Rahul is a well-known product leader in the tech arena and the product arena, and has an extensive experience in companies in both US as well as India. So previously, he has worked for various large companies, successful products like Twitter, Say Media, Snapdeal, Six Apart, and various other technology companies. So without taking much of the time, we'll jump onto the session. Thank you so much, Rahul, for doing this. Let's start with a quick introduction, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you are up to, and we can kick the session started.
Thanks for inviting me. Thanks, Divakar, and thanks to everybody for joining us this evening. I'm very excited to speak to everybody today, and hopefully it'll be a good interactive session where everybody gets to learn a little bit. As you kind of introduced me, I mean, I've been around for a bit now. Spent almost 12 years in the Valley building consumer products. My last gig in the Valley was at Twitter, where I spent around 2.5 years. And before that, I was working for various content media startups like Six Apart and Say Media. I worked for Semantic, building an enterprise tech product. That was a short span of a year where I actually got to build something from 0 to 1 in an enterprise space. But beyond that, most of my experience has been in internet, consumer internet. So even in India, I worked at Snapdeal and now Zomato, both places highly consumer internet centric in the e-commerce space. So that's primarily where my experience lies, and hopefully I'll be able to share some of that today.
Okay, great. So today we have this fireside chat format where I have a few questions that I would want to discuss with Rahul. Uh, Anybody, whenever you have any questions, I suggest that you put them in the chat section so that we have an organized list to discuss. And maybe after 20-25 minutes of questioning, we'll open up the session for questions. So let's get going with the first one. So Rahul, having worked both in Valley as well as in India, uh, what are some of the major differences and commonalities that you observe? And what can Indian tech learn from the successful companies of the Valley about building world-class companies?
That's a good question. I think, yeah, I think both places have their unique advantages, and I'm sure we can learn a bunch from how tech teams out there operate, and they can learn a bunch from how we are doing things. Some of the common things are that especially in startups, is that um, I think let's start with what the differences are. I think some of the key differences in the workforce, if you think in India, we're over indexed on folks who have basically, we have a lot of younger workforce. So if you look at most startups, a large percentage of our population will be in 0 to 3 years of experience. And so, that kind of lens, you have to kind of manage your org accordingly with that kind of a skill set. Whereas in the US, a much mature market, most people are on their third, fourth, fifth startup. Startups are very common. People understand the risks. People understand what the trade-offs are, and they've built. A lot of people are more exposed to building 0 to 1 products, and they understand what the trade-offs there are from prioritization, from choice of technology point of view. So we although startups are not entirely new in India, but there are a lot of people who for whom they're entering the workforce, and this is the first startup that they're obviously, because they're just entering, this will be the first or the second job that they are in. So that exposure is not there. They haven't encountered those sort of questions before. So I think one is that's the kind of the difference there is. I would say the second part, which I think where we are more pragmatic, is that more outcome focused. Like, I don't think we obsess a lot about the how should we be operating, how should we be working, or the process part of it. I think there's a lot of focus on the process part of it in the US, which to an extent helps, but after a while it becomes more like that's not, process is not the end goal, right? It's just a means to the end goal. But we see, we used to, if I, now kind of reflect on my experience of all the time there was a lot of more emphasis on the how of how should we be operating, how should we be building products, and not all of that leads to building better products. A lot of that is, academic. And out here we are more pragmatic. I think we are like, okay, this is the outcome. This is a game of speed. Most times it's like oriented towards like, let's get there, and then reflectively we can figure out, what did we learn from this and improve that in the second iteration, and so forth. So I think those are some of the basic kind of differences. The other ones being, ecosystem is a lot more mature. When we talk about building technology, people have navigated multiple phases of a company. So there are phases when you have to go ops heavy, and then you have to come out of that by solving and automating and using technology and digitizing and becoming more product and tech driven. Uh, a lot of companies here are yet to do that. So they have to learn like, okay, what is the role of technology, that how can technology be used as truly be used as a differentiator, right? There is one basic level, obviously, that people understand how, technology can enable a business. Like every company today is a tech company, like that's needless to be said. But how do you use technology to be a differentiator, right? Uber was not the first company to hail, for cab hailing, right? There were many before that, but they didn't solve the problem deep enough, right? They kind of did a half-assed job of it, and therefore there was no differentiation. And when Uber came around, it kind of, it's just an example. It kind of showed what's possible through technology and how frictionless it actually can be. And they solved some problems really deep around location, and obviously aggregation, supply aggregation, and so on. But they used tech as a differentiator. It was, business model was one aspect of it, but primarily if the experience wasn't as seamless as it is, who knows how that would have been panned out. So I think learning that, truly kind of imbibing that tech differentiation is can lead to a huge, difference in the business outcome. I think a lot of Indian companies have to figure that and kind of navigate that phase where they can go from, being ops heavy to more tech heavy. So that remains to be seen.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I think we have seen a lot of ops heavy kind of businesses which get things done, which move it to the next stage. But then comes all the concerns on pricing and unit economics and managing large ops heavy companies, which India has seen over the last few years. And totally agree that over the next few years, that's something which could change. Uh, but what are some of the things which you think India is doing right? Indian startups are doing right, and we are at sort of a plus which we should leverage.
I think one is that, I feel that the speed at which Indian startups operate and ship things is probably much faster than I've seen the speed of execution across the board. Like whoever I talk to or whoever I'm observing, and obviously where we at Zomato and previously at Snapdeal, I think the number of things that we used to kind of pick up and move week to week was a lot of stuff. Like even today in COVID or before that, and it's the same for a lot of other startups that I know. And I think and I think it's just the ecosystem. Like things, the rate of change is so high in India. Like with systemic changes, with geo coming, demonetization happening, all of this happening in the last 2 3 years. So many big, uh, you know, drastic changes in the ecosystem, and yet people are rolling up their sleeves and figuring out ways out of it, and out executing and executing faster than before. So I think that kind of excites me, and with the rate of change so high, you cannot cannot coast, or you cannot just be in like cruise control where have a cadence about building product and nothing changes, and you go week to week, sprint to sprint, and it's the same. I think that that is pretty exciting to be from that point of view, uh, being in an emergent area where lot of things are changing from month to month. So I feel that is one thing that really stands out, the speed of execution.
Makes sense. A fair point to note. Okay, let's move on to the next question. We wanted to discuss a little bit about product market fit, and how does the whole concept of product market fit change in times like these? How should young founders and product managers think about product market fit and product management in times of Corona?
Got it. And that, I mean, that answer differs from, what company and what stage of the startup you are in. For example, if you're just starting up and you had plans to, build your startup now and were going to look for funding and stuff. So obviously for those folks, I feel, so the good part is that a lot of the noise is not there anymore, right? And you cannot, you won't have artificial illusion of a product market fit just that's aided by artificial means like maybe discounting or spends or some other factors. I think that noise is gone, so there'll be a lot more clarity to founders. The real traction that the product has, the real user love that it has, retention and so on. So people will figure out quickly if there is real value that people are finding in those products. Uh, I would say that largely the products will. There is hardly any kind of product that will be or domain that is not impacted. So there are two ways to look at it. There are companies that are building products in industries that got a big boost due to COVID, and there are industries that will be or where the future is either impacted or we don't know yet whether it will recover or not, right? So for the previous case where you have a lot of these companies like collaboration tools, video conferencing, ed tech, anything that has become now like the only way to operate, so to speak. So those guys will see a lot of usage, a lot of boost in this kind of a scenario. But the challenge for founders is to kind of figure out how much of that is temporary and how much of that is going to sustain once some sort of normalcy returns, right? So you could kind of compare it with the same, like, where you're using venture capital to fuel your growth. This is like COVID is fueling an enormous phase of growth, which may not be sustainable. Like if you look at Zoom, for example, it's a very well documented case. Their MAU is through the roof, right? But how much of it is monetizable, right? Their AWS costs have gone even higher than that, right? So it's not coming for free. So they're spending a lot more money just to sustain that MAU. Now, once normalcy returns, are they going to be able to monetize all those folks? Are they going to be all those users going to be retentive? We don't know, right? For Zoom, it's a public company, it's a different game. But if you are a startup that is seeing that traction suddenly in that area, you have to figure out like how much of it is, and it requires a lot of intellectual honesty to figure out like, hey, is this product market fit or is this some temporary spike that we are seeing because of the what's going on with COVID. And on the other side of the spectrum are companies where, for example, if you're building something for live events, for example, where the jury is still out that, will we ever see big concerts? How many people will actually go? If you're building something that requires these, human experiences, in-person experiences, so you have to kind of evaluate that right now and see that does it still make sense to build that, because a lot of behaviors might come back and a lot of behaviors will permanently change post COVID. So do you want to hitch your wagon and take that risk, assuming that everything will be fine in 3 months, or do you want to have that conversation now, saying that okay, this looks like not the right time to build a solution like this, because in startups and product market fit, timing is like as crucial as anything else, right? So with challenging time to raise funding, a lot of emphasis on runways and burn rates. Do you think you'll get there? Do you think you'll have enough iterations to figure this out? Or do you think it's better to have that conversation now, hard conversation, and figure out, if you should kind of pivot and solve some other problem? So primarily, I think those are the two camps in which founders today should kind of figure out where they lie and evaluate themselves. But net,
Absolutely.
I think the noise is gone. I think a lot of focus on fundamentals is back.
Yep, absolutely. As you rightly mentioned, in both headwinds and tailwind businesses right now, it's essential to not assume that this is just a windstorm which will just go away, and the impacts are going to be long lasting and uncertain. So, very fair points. Uh, so, Rahul, moving on to the next question, we wanted to hear a bit about your time at Twitter. Uh, we've all, most of us have used Twitter, love Twitter. It's an incredible product. So why don't you tell us something about Twitter, things that you learn, things that are great that we could learn from how things were done at Twitter?
It's one of the most fascinating companies. I feel like it was a fantastic experience for me, specifically especially because I love the product. I think it's probably the top three products that I love. Like it's so good. I really like it, and I think it's so unique. And I think conversations that happen on Twitter don't happen anywhere else, which you can't say about a lot of products, which even if they are more used or whatever. So I think it was a very challenging product to work on. I think why? Because it's deceptively simple. People don't understand the complexity of Twitter. People think at that time it used to be 140 characters. Now it's at least 280. But at that point, people used to feel like, why is your tech team so big? Why are there so many PMs in Twitter? Like it's just you just posting 140 character tweets, this and that. But the simpler the product is, the harder it is to work on it, because anybody can make a complex. Just putting 20,000 features every 3 months, whatever, adding feature bloat to products is very easy, but keeping the essence of the product same and figuring out like what to shape, how will within the constraints of Twitter. And the other constraint of Twitter was one was the character length. The other was that it has to be real time, right? If Lady Gaga is on her way to the airport and she has 5 minutes to chat with her fans, the we can't have a 5 minute lag in which the conversation just get killed, right? Or even 2 minute lag. Like we have to, it has to be always be real time, always be as close to real time. And so those constraints are, no other product has that constraint, right? So it made it very challenging. So therefore, and Twitter was seeing traction in so many ways, right? You had all the newsrooms are using Twitter, all the sports teams are using Twitter. So there are these verticals. You could say that you could build a deeper experience in any of the. There could be music, right? Twitter music was a thing in between. Uh, so it becomes really hard to figure out, like, should you keep a horizontal general platform versus, should you go deeper and make it like, easy for, maybe it's an entertainment thing, like where you come and, have conversations with celebrities or something, or maybe it's a sports fan thing, maybe it's a TV series show thing. So there were a lot of these back and forth conversations about, what we should do, what we should not do. And again, the constraint was to keep the product the same, like it was simple. So I think prioritization was very difficult. I think you really learned about making hard choices, hard decisions. Uh, so I think those were some of the things. Then obviously it was a very public product. Like everybody had a lot of opinion on it, and every day we were in the news, every single day without fail. There was like so much this thing attention on it. I used to work on a lot of safety features, which were again in the news all the time. I was on the team that dealt with like spam and abuse and safety features like account prevention and two-factor authentication and so on and so forth. So we used to have a lot of firefighting. So crisis management became really a good skill. Like every day there would be like outsized challenges or crises that we had to kind of manage cross-functionally across the organization. So I think I learned a lot about how to deal with difficult situations and rally a bunch of folks together to kind of solve some problems. So I think those were some of the key kind of learnings. And the other thing was focus. At some point you have to kind of ignore all of this. People will say, people have an opinion. We also made mistakes and we also learned from those. Like, I remember working on the mute feature. I don't know if you guys use the mute feature on Twitter, and the block feature. The first time we did a version of the block feature, and at that time, some of the shortcomings of our decision making was that maybe we weren't talking to the users enough. And by users, I mean people who are actually getting harassed on the platform. And so the bunch of us who were sitting in our office in San Francisco kind of made that decision on how the block feature should work, and it totally backfired on us because people who were actually using the feature and who were getting trolled and harassed, they pointed out all the shortcomings in it and how it is such a bad implementation for them because it could potentially put them in more danger because they can't now see what other folks are talking about them, and it could be real threats and it could be real stuff. So we had to kind of roll it back within 24 hours and kind of iterate on that feature and fix it. So there were a lot of such experiences where we kind of understood the value of talking to your real customers, the right cohorts, involving them, because again, your community is everything, right? Those are your most passionate users who, despite all the challenges, are actually talking to you, using your product, and so making their experiences safer on the platform. It was a huge learning, and so yeah, and then also launching like some of the large features which at Twitter scale in short time taught us a lot.
Yeah, I think block and mute were the last huge features to come out of Twitter.
Yeah,
And
it
beauty
seems
of
like
these,
it.
yeah, that's the beauty of these. Some of these large companies. You see Twitter, you see WhatsApp. You don't see a lot of features coming out, and that is one thing which a lot of PMs don't understand. As you rightly said, that it's easier to just ship things blindly, but shipping the right thing is a tough skill to gather.
Yeah,
Uh,
we also had a lot of internal tooling. For example, I'll just tell you an anecdote. We built an internal tool called BotMaker, which was basically just ML-based system that detected potential abuse or spam. So spam we kind of solved 100% on Twitter. So you will not see spam anymore. At one point, that was a huge problem. You'll see just gibberish being posted by bots. But abuse is different, right? Abuse is actually contextual. Abuse has language nuances, cultural nuances. How do
yep.
you say like two people are having a friendly chat with the F word in it versus, if somebody's getting abused? So there's a lot of, and what if it's in Hindi? What if it's in some other language? So on. So we built a system which would do a lot of this in real time. And later on, I was here in India. I was just, browsing Twitter and looking what's happening. And there was a congressional testimony when they had called the Twitter lawyers and the chief counsel, where they were talking about this tool that we built internally, and it got mentioned so many times, bot maker, bot maker, bot maker. And we were like, what the hell is going on? Like, we never thought that in the congressional testimony at the White House they'll be talking about, what is the tool Twitter is using to identify Russian bots for election intervention and so on. So at that point, all of that misinformation, we were still in pre-truth society. We had not understood that there is going to be this kind of abuse of platform. So that again was a hugely important kind of milestone in this internet economy, because the way these platforms are getting used now, we didn't understand back then.
Yes, exactly. It must be a lot of responsibility as well, because the decisions that you take as PM and
Oh
Twitter
yeah.
could have massive changes in in the world.
Yeah, and I think you can't be naive anymore. I think at that point, there was give us some benefit of doubt because we're talking about 2014, 13, 14, 15. At that point, this was not as large spread. The biggest, we used to see harassment on the platform, and that was our blind spot, which we were trying really sincerely to solve. Gamergate happened around the same time, and a bunch of other things that happened. But we didn't really understand that there's a different dimension of this abuse that's going on that's invisible at that time. But now I think we've had enough time to understand that, and therefore you'll see more action now because I think people have understood that there's a side to be taken here, and there's more or less we know what the pattern here is of abuse and so on.
Okay, maybe some other day we'll have a longer conversation on just Twitter, because
Yeah,
there's so much more to talk. But so let's move to the next thing. I think another great company that you work for is Zomato. Uh, Personally, I've been a Zomato fan since it was just a list of restaurants 10, 12 years back. So, how has your journey been with Zomato? And what are some things that we can learn from Zomato?
cool. I think it's been fascinating. I don't think I've learned so much in the last couple of years as I've learned here. It's again one of those unique places to work at. It has a very distinct culture. Um, it's and the I think the fascinating part is it stays true to the culture. Like a lot of companies grow, evolve, and I understand culture also evolves. It's a living organism, but I feel like to the first principles of beliefs that the company has, it does the best job at just sticking to them, which is very interesting and great to see. In terms of how what I talk when I talk to other folks, like what they should take from what I'm learning at Zomato. I feel like from a product point of view, first is speed of execution and outcome focus, and cutting the noise and not getting swayed by Me Too features or vanity metrics or things like that that will not create lasting user value. So I think we do a decent job of just sticking to the vision or sticking to the plans that we have around being user centric and just solving user problems, right? Because in our space there's a lot of distraction. There's You can easily spend a month shipping random things that don't move the needle for either the user or the merchant or our riders or us as stakeholders, right? So I think being that super laser focused on creating value for one of the stakeholders, and always questioning, like, are we working fast enough and are we creating enough value for these people? Could we be doing more? I think that is something that I've learned, like how to be that laser sharp focused all the time, like all the time. Like there's no 2 days that will go past where if we don't let things go for a while and then have to be backtracked. I think that is a phenomenal kind of learning for me as well. Speed of execution and comes from that. I think there is a lot of we don't spend a lot of time, again, as I was talking about, uh, we don't overthink consistency, for example, of development process across teams. We don't mandate any specific process. We don't do a central kind of mandate of, okay, now from tomorrow every team will work like that. I feel we give a lot of teams we give all our teams enough autonomy with some guardrails. Cadence is good. Whether you want to do a 3-day sprint or a 7-day sprint, it's up to you. You want to do daily stand-ups, they are great, but if they don't work for you, then it's still okay. But you have to come up with answers, like how will you solve for communication, how will you solve for collaboration, and so on. So I feel this is the first time I actually worked in an environment like that, because even at Twitter or in a Snapdeal, we had a lot of central philosophy that gets passed down to the teams, which is around, okay, everybody behaves like this, talks like this, works like this, versus here seeing that organically teams kind of figure out what best works for them, right? So that's, I think, great learning to see that you can actually create a high functioning environment with those principles. And I'm not saying that we never tell teams how to operate. I think if we see there are areas that need work, we definitely intervene, but it's always like that, like it's always an intervention where things are going wrong. So I feel like that has been great. And I feel like collectively we do a good job of keeping the bar high in terms of detail orientation on the product, what is ship worthy, what is not. uh, we are very honest in giving feedback across the teams, especially in product team. and everybody is super conscious of, they shouldn't let the team down by shipping something that's suboptimal. So I think once you see that and that culture catches on, it's hard to go back from there.
Okay. Thanks for that. So I had a few more questions, but the number of questions that I'm getting in the chat are quite a lot. So I think we'll move to the questions from the audience now so that we have more engagement. So so the questions are all mentioned in the chat section. Krishna, you want to start? You have the first question. Please ask your question.
Yeah, my first question is, what are your thoughts on product prioritization and obviously reducing the um, friction of using a product?
So prioritization, I feel, a lot of PMs struggle with, and a lot of people. It's a hotly debated topic every time a bunch of PMs meet. Uh, I think the root cause is that clarity of goals, right? I feel like a lot of these discussions are avoidable if there is clear articulation of goals and clear alignment on those goals, right? So if you, for example, so there, and again, at a leadership level, there are prioritization challenges across different levels, right? So are you talking about between product A and product B, which one we should build? Or are you talking about in product A within this team, what should be the backlog and so on? But again, I think all of this kind of uh, gets clarified with the clarity of goals that you have. At any point, you should be clear that, okay, over the next 1 month, 2 months, these are the three things that company wide are going to be the ones that create impact. These are my metrics for the next couple of months. If that is clear, a lot of people have those, but they are defined in a way where they don't help you with making those trade-offs. So first, I think work on those and get them clarified and get them fine-tuned multiple times so that and teams are bought in and aligned on that. The second, if you're talking about day-to-day prioritization, which is like, okay, now we have these two ideas in the team, and which one should I go for it? Go for. So one, you could do some quick. There are a bunch of frameworks available for that. You can look them up. You can do some sort of a ROI-based framework, which is like, hey, how much, what is the best case impact that this will create, and what is the effort required for this? Or you could look at, a lot of teams have some other tagging mechanism. They look at, is this a new thing, is this a maintenance thing, or is this something that will create significant differentiation for me in the market? And then there are different weightages assigned to these categories, and based on that, and that will depend on the phase of product that you are in. If you, for example, are only worried about, if you are, for example, in a 0 to 1 kind of a product, and you need that, you want to speed of shipping is important, and you want to get user feedback quickly, then you'll prioritize differently versus where quality is more important and where you have to get the entire set of features ready before you can ship. So there you'll prioritize differently, and make sure that completeness is you're over indexed on completeness. So I feel, again, to just recap, most times, 90% of the times, prioritization issues happen if the goals are not clear. So work on that. Tactically, you can use a bunch of other frameworks to solve your day-to-day struggle. Yeah, but most of it is you can just tie back to the goal. Okay, right now that's my goal, so the other two things fall off, and I'll just pick this one.
Yeah, that makes sense. How about removing friction when a user is using a product? Like, is there any framework or what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think there are a couple of simple things. One is that you got to talk to users, right? You got to also there are, see, either you, there are PMs who are good at kind of disassociating from the details, and they can look at the products objectively and test it and kind of understand what it is being in a user shoe. uh, and if and some people, for some people it's a blind spot. So for those people, talking to users, doing user research well, and for example, for us, if somebody on my team is building merchant product, they have to spend a lot of time at restaurants with merchants, understanding what the pain points or problems are. They cannot just sit in the office and assume that a merchant is going to use it like in a certain way, and therefore even for our CD agents, when we make products, a lot of time we assume that they'll use it like how we built it, but that's not the case, right? So to be able to solve friction, you have to first understand where the friction is, and it may not be where you think it is, right? And that you can only know once you actually sit with these customers and deeply understand how they're trying to use what is the how they're trying to use that product, and how they're trying to get the work done. If it's a internal workflow tool, or if it's a consumer side feature, then you have to kind of sit with them and understand how do they use this usually, when do they use it, do they do this in a car while they're commuting, in a bus, on the bike, are they sitting at home, are they on the app, or are they on the web? So all of that deep intelligence you should have. Once you understand that, then then the solving part is obviously easier, which everybody most PMs are able to figure out, okay, these are the inefficiencies in the product, and this is how we'll make it better. But I think the struggle mostly is to understand and align on, like, is that the right, what you think is friction, is that really friction, or is it somewhere else?
Yeah, thanks, Rahul. Yeah, that's the key point. Like understanding what is the friction. I think that answered my question query. Thank
I'll
you.
give you one quick anecdote. At Twitter, we had a multi-step sign up flow, which is like you choose a username, password, then you had to follow some people, then you had to talk about some of your interests, and select those interests. So it was like I have a vague memory now, but it was a 4 or 5 step process at that point. And after that, you landed on your homepage. uh, so obviously the team, I was not working on it, but the team that was working on it figured that, okay, this is too cumbersome, this should not take so many steps, and they kind of solved it like it was a one-step process. And it was beautiful. Like, we did the demo, and we saw, okay, you just username, password, and boom, you're on your home timeline. And intuitively, by all measures, it was a better process, right? You are quickly solve that friction for users. But it didn't work because when users landed on their timeline, there was no content. So it may have gotten more people to their timeline quickly, but over a week, a month, less number of people were coming back. Whereas in this process, where there was a 4 step process, you had followed enough people, you had given us enough data about what your interests are. So every time you came back on Twitter, there was enough for you to kind of engage in, and over time you retained. So that is one kind of a tangential example of knowing what is that, was that really friction, or was that something that was an investment that users could encash later by virtue of having a better experience.
Thanks for the answer, Rahul. Uh,
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
let's move to the next question by Rahul Raj. And I request everyone to stick to one question because there's a very long list of people who want to ask questions. So, Rahul, can you ask your question next? Rahul Raj.
Yeah, thanks, Diwakar. Hi, Rahul. So the way I see, this is a time of crisis, and a lot of companies are looking to tap into domains that they are not really known for. Example will be Make My Trip, right? They have started doing food delivery. Now, being a product manager, how do I watch out for such competition and ensure that my product engagement or business is not getting affected? Because Make My Trip has a really huge user base, right? If it was some other company, we could have like uh, taken the bullet, maybe.
Yeah, so I feel like it's for most part it's mostly about what understanding your own strengths, and making sure that you focus on the right things, and the customer, you all make sure that customer experience on your platform is great. And I think the rest of the stuff will take care of itself. In this specific example, I think when COVID happened, I think everybody, especially companies like MMT, my guess is, are worried that their users may just not, because nobody's traveling, they may just delete the app, right? So every app is all such apps are figuring out how to stay relevant and how to kind of keep users engaged, and how to keep that distribution going where they stay on people's phones. So there's nothing wrong in that. Whatever works for whatever. I mean, there's no harm in that. How I think about it is that it has to be natural, and you have to play to your strengths. For example, when we decided to do groceries temporarily during COVID, it was a very natural use case because we had the platform, we had the logistics, we had the app. It's the same ordering experience, and a lot of people actually reached out to us, a lot of retailers, that why don't you do this? Like, you have all the infrastructure to do it. So for us, it was very natural, and it also served a definite user pain, which was like people were not serving them that, right? All the typical platforms were backlogged. There were no deliveries happening for 5, 7, 10 days. So for us, we were like, okay, this is a perfect match where we have the infra, we have the technology, and there's a user need, and users are really longing to, hurting because they're not getting that delivery. And governments were encouraging, governments all enabled us and kind of reached out to us and whitelisted us to do that. So for us, that was like why we did it. And different people will figure out different things. But for me, I think there has to be a core competency or core knowledge that you have, that you can leverage to venture into these adjacent areas. Like for example, if we had to do something totally orthogonal today, which is nothing to do, which we haven't learned well to do, that would take much longer to ramp up. That will take much, that will have its own costs associated with learning and so on. So yeah.
Thanks, Rahul.
Shiva Shankar.
Hey, hi Rahul. So I think my question was like when Dipendra had written this blog, right? Like that, 30% of the orders were actually coming from tier 3 and 4 cities. So, I mean, obviously during lockdown times there would have been a significant fall. But I just was curious as to how do you think that generally food ordering business has is coming up, and especially in tier 3 and 4 cities, are you seeing their business over there reviving? So yeah, just around that. Not
No, I
really a
think,
product question.
from what I can share, I feel like as with all things, like recovery is also being driven by the top cities. So I expect the 3 and 4 cities to recover later. Although we have, like we've seen, it's a base effect also, right? Those cities are smaller, bigger cities, so therefore the impact is
Right.
also relatively okay. But bigger cities are definitely leading the recovery right now.
Got it, got it. Cool, cool. Thanks.
Sandeep Bhat.
Yeah, I mean, he has pretty much answered my question around. I mean, entering into, vertically opposite businesses. Basically.
Sorry, I
Everything.
didn't.
I mean, my question was around the, make my trip entering into a different domain, right? Like, especially when they are laying off people, how do you decide to invest in setting up a new business, basically? Because both contradictory. Right?
It's not contradictory. I mean, I think, see, the businesses are impacted, right? So you can either do nothing, or you can figure out some ways or try experiment in ways where you can stay relevant and stay a part of users' lives, right? However people think can bring value to the users' lives. So different people are. So if MMT knows that, for example, next month maybe not a lot of people are going to travel, it's not allowed, they can choose to do nothing. But I don't think that serves any purpose. It's better to experiment and fail rather than not do anything. You may argue whether the strategy is correct, or maybe they should have done X versus Y, but I don't think just trying out something uh, again with the intention of bringing value to users is that bad.
Thanks, Rahul. Yeah.
And they are not, by the way, supply chain, they are not doing their own deliveries. They are obviously, they don't have a delivery fleet, so they are just acting as a lead gen for all these merchants who can then do the delivery themselves. So I think they've signed up with Ganjoo or something.
Yeah, that should again cut down on the margin or whatever
Yeah.
they could.
Okay. Achal Garg.
Thanks, Devakar. Hi, Rahul. Rahul, I have a question wherein it's about the app notifications, right? So, especially with respect to food delivery service providers, we see too many notifications at times, or it could be a different app which is giving too less of a notification. So how do you find the right balance? Because if it's too much, I may end up, or a user may end up disabling the notification. But if it's too less, you risk not engaging the customer enough. How do you find the right balance there?
So I think it's a constant process and constant process of adjustments, right? For the longest time, we were super conservative. We had a cap of one notification per user per day and a bunch of other rules built in. Uh, and we saw that, as users get familiar, at one point, I think we've also evolved as users, right? Uh, at one point, notifications, people were not used to. People thought they were intrusive. Then they got used to it, and depends from market to market. In India, we are a very SMS heavy market. People are used to like just getting a lot of SMS. People like people sensitivity over time has also changed to these notifications, right? So the way we look at it is obviously one is a data driven approach. You look at post your notification, how many people are engaging with them, how many people are disabling, how many people are uninstalling your app. We do user surveys on understanding what that feedback is. But it's also intuitively what you think is the right experience, right? uh, I think for for a large set of customers who order from us frequently, getting a nice push message which is creative at around lunchtime, saying that okay, this is what you could be interested in, which is personalized, is not that bad of a UX. Versus, if you got that at 12 o'clock also, at 3 o'clock also, which was again, not personalized, was not sent nicely, was not relevant to your behavior on the app, I feel that would be bad UX, right? So a little bit of intuition on a little bit of figuring out like what timings work, and again having hard limits. Like for example, more than two a day for any user is too much, according to us. You cannot just random. And again, that becomes more tricky when you have multiple use cases, right? So we have gold customers who also order from us, who also brought grocery from us. So should we then send like two gold notifications, two grocery notifications, and two food? Obviously, we shouldn't, and that's why we don't. But again, I don't think there's a finite destination here. It's a constant kind of uh, finding out what's working, what's not, adjusting that. And obviously, we make mistakes at times, and we come to know about them immediately. Uh, but yeah, I feel like if you do a mix of both, a bit of intuition as a user, what would you like to see, and keep a tab on table and keep a tab on the data and have some qualitative check-ins from time to time, you'll figure out what the right balance is.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yep, that makes sense. That's such an important point right now because of all the temptation that people get into uh, of sending notifications. It's very tempting once you are building products and you have pressure of growth, you have pressure of numbers, and you start saying, okay, 5% conversion is fine, but 5% conversion means 95% non-conversion. 95% people don't like it.
Like it, yeah, yeah.
So
And
if
I think it's very, I guess there will be a phase now that businesses are recovering where you'll see a lot more pressure on like, okay, let the push notification be the one all solution for all our troubles. Let's just send push and see how users come back.
Yeah, in some of my studies in past and research, one thing that I used to do was that uh, always used to figure out how many uninstalls uh, are push notifications pushing towards, or how's push notification leading to
Yeah.
low retentions, and because push notifications work both ways now.
Totally.
You send more than the right number, yeah, people would just delete the app
Yeah.
because with the low amount of low cost of data and high speed, it's so easy to delete apps and then use it whenever you want.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. I mean, and now that we have Twitter also, you get to know user feedback immediately on push notifications.
Yeah.
Uh, so that's also a good way.
Yeah.
People will let you know immediately.
Okay. So next question is from Ashik. I think it's linked to what we are discussing right now on creativity and brand communication. Ashik, you want to ask a question?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Divakar. Hi. So it's basically about Zomato is known for their brand communication, right? Often with witty responses, great content, things like that, right? So how exactly is the experience from a product angle, like working with a team who's super focused about how the brand needs to communicate and things like that?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think they are their game is super strong, and they make you, it's well, I get to learn a lot from them. And the way it's a super lean small team of 3-4 people, and who do all the brand marketing, uh, at least leads, and then how they are always like somehow they have a great pulse of what's going on, and they always kind of hit the bullseye with whatever they're trying to communicate. Every week, whatever they do is being covered in some shape or form, especially in uh, between the people who are marketing buffs and who discuss this quite a lot in publications that are made for those people. So I think it, keeps everybody on their toes to kind of match that expertise that they have. But for again, it's one of those things at Zomato that I don't understand how it works. It's like such a small team who do like, yeah, I'm sure you've seen those tweets in the middle also, where they have the pulse, and I think they've honed it over. They have honed their craft over all these years. Uh, but yeah, it's great fun working with that lot.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, in that aspect, I think Zomato is by far the leader in like both Zomato and Dunzo. Always on point, always topical.
I think the guy who's doing it at Dunzo was at Zomato first. He's like Zomato. I think so. Yeah, I have to check it out.
And then Zomato has Akshar Pathak, I think,
Yeah,
the guy who built minimum Bollywood posters and
yeah.
creative stuff. But very, very relevant. Things that you look forward to.
I think everybody follows him on Twitter, but if you don't, you should. I don't think anybody
Also,
doesn't, but if you,
also Kabir is also a very quirky guy. So he also comes with a lot of things like this. So yeah, it's then their DNA also, I guess.
yeah,
Maybe next time we should have somebody from that team to talk to
keep
all
it
of
up
us.
there. Yeah, I don't think he'll come, but you should try to.
Okay, Abhinav.
Hey, thanks, Devaka. Hi, Rahul.
I,
So, yeah, my question is basically, as a PM, what are your top 3 metrics which basically you track every day in the morning as a PM? Everyone does, and how have those metrics have changed before COVID and post COVID? Earlier, probably they were like peak orders, peak hours where all the orders were used to come, used to track those. But now the situation has changed. It's moved to a lot of safety and sanitization. So, how those metrics have changed according to you? What's the North Star metric, and how do you see basically these metrics changing in the next 3 to 5 years? Also?
Sure. I think fundamentally, first of all, for a complex business like ours, there's not one or two North Star metrics, but different businesses have different metrics and lenses to look at. So if I talk primarily only about online ordering, then yes, I mean, there's a bunch of P0 metrics that we look at every day, like, from installs, uninstalls to engagement time to orders to unit economics to region-wise summaries of all of these metrics that we look at, and there are a ton of them. Logistics has its own set of metrics that are P0. Your then you have systemic metrics around tech metrics around efficiency and stuff like that. So I feel like for a complex operational business like this, we have a set of metrics that cannot be boiled down to just one or two. At the top level, yes, you can look at order volume and GMV and unit economics, but that doesn't tell you the entire story every day. So you have to kind of make sure that you have a comprehensive story every day. The one of the things obviously that has changed is safety, and there's a lot more stuff that we are doing around it, and every that has kind of come up to the fore, and that will stay, I think, at the top for the next foreseeable future. So that is something that we track very closely now. We look at practices being followed, the compliance, the coverage day on day. Are we improving that? Are more restaurants doing that? And then how do we communicate that to our users and so forth? So from a data point of view, I feel that is one significant change that has happened. Obviously, there has been some the good part about this is like we've made a lot of stride in being more efficient business, so unit economics is much better than before, and so on. So but again, the focus remains the same. There's no change there. The only change that has come in is around the safety metrics that we have now.
Okay.
Sure, thanks.
Gopalakrishna?
Yeah, hi Divakar. Thanks Divakar and thanks Rahul. So my question is on a more of a personal note. So you have had the transition across domains. So you worked in social media, you worked in e-commerce. I just wanted to ask, like, what was your thought process during that change? Like, how did you go about making that change? That's part one. And another question is, once you've decided to make that switch, how do you approach that and make sure you're up to speed in that domain? And how do you approach that?
Yeah, and I think these are different answers for different people. It would primarily just depend on what excites you, and at that point, and what do you think you will be you'll have most fun building or most fun working in, right? So I don't think there was a formula or a lot of deliberation that I did. A lot of this just happened along the way, and at that point in time, I felt like, okay, this is a good opportunity. Let's just do it. So for me, that was the process. I also don't advise sometimes overthinking some of this. I think more than the domain people, the people you work with, like you should optimize for learning. Like, will you learn something here? Are the people going to be fun? And do you think that's the area of your career that you're going to invest in? So I think those were the kind of the questions that I asked myself when I make that. But yeah, I think. Once you make that switch, you have to understand, as a lot of that at times, a lot of the first principles thinking and a lot of the skill set of a PM remains the same. I don't think you'll have like 80% will be the same that you need across all these things, right? First principle thinking should be strong. You should be a strong problem solver. You should, have user centricity. You should be a good communicator. All of that will remain the same, but the nuances of the businesses that change, like a fully digital product like Twitter versus like a highly ops intensive e-commerce business like Snapdeal or Zomato. So that part you will have to quickly learn. Like, how do you what are the things that you and that happens when you're open to learning. If you go in and say that, okay, I already know how to be a PM, so there is nothing new here, then you might be blind to a bunch of things that you can do better, versus going in with an open mind and saying that, okay, I have to pick up this from zero and understand and spend time with business, spend time with all the stakeholders to understand as much as I can, and then build those perspectives in your decision making. I feel that is the first thing that you should do. You shouldn't be afraid of saying that I don't know this, or I need to learn this, even though you spend like 5, 10, 15, whatever number of years you may have spent. So I think that's the most critical part of it. And then you learn, and your decision making is better. You may be making 3 out of 5 good decisions. As you learn the domain, you probably get it to 4.5, and that's how it is.
Cool. That answers. Thanks, Rahul. Yeah.
Okay. Swarnima?
Hi, Rahul. So I wanted to understand from you is that I see that Zomato's funnel over the period of time has evolved a lot. Like I think some days ago also there was a new update which had entirely like some evolution on the discovery process of getting onto a particular restaurant and then maybe discovering further things about it. So I want to understand how are like what is the process that leads such decisions, And obviously there'll be some design, some user testing also going on, but how do you weigh in? Because changing a funnel would require a lot of cross-functional syncing up with multiple teams. So how do you handle that? How is it planned, and what drives the decision making over there?
Yeah, so I think it's very dangerous for a product to kind of stagnate, right? Because user behavior evolves, products evolve, the phase of your company evolves. For example, 6 months ago we were not doing alcohol delivery, we were not doing grocery delivery, we didn't have gold on O2, a bunch of other things, right, that come up. So so you have a product and then you keep adding things to it, and at some point it becomes super suboptimal, right? You can then say that, okay, but everything's working fine and let's not risk it. Or you can say, no, we need to take a look at it and we need to make sure that the UX is great. And we have to take that risk of trying things and figuring out how we can make it better, right? So I think the first thing is that understanding that you can't have too stagnant a product in these times, right? So you have to kind of build a culture and process which allows you to do that. The second is then how do you responsibly do that, right? So then you build in process around like what are you have to map some problems and say that, okay, with this redesign, these are 3 or 4 key problems that I'm looking to solve. And that could be like, maybe you're talking about funnel optimization could be one. Discovery could be one, like I need users to see more restaurants before they order. But the one could be just that, I need more top of the funnel for all the new categories that I'm building. So, people today, for example, I could say that people don't know how to discover the grocery flows, or people don't know how to discover the alcohol flows and so on, right? People don't know where to find the gold membership, XYZ. So you should have a clear articulation of like, these are the 3-4 problems that I'm addressing. And these are the 3 to 4 metrics that are good sufficient proxies for these, for measuring whether these are working in the right direction or not. And with that, I think, without further overthinking and stuff, then you should do a mixture of intuition, like what you think are some right calls, and at regular intervals you should do beta testing, you should do external user testing, you should send the app to a bunch of people and tell them, okay, use it, give us feedback, so that you get build in that qualitative feedback loop in that process itself. And then finally, when you're out there in the market, then users, all your actual production data will tell you what's moving better, what's not, and continue to kind of evolve. So I think, a lot of people think that these might be like hugely uh,
Risky.
contested kind of decisions for us, and hugely debated. Some of them are not, even though we've changed the app so often. We don't think, we understand that for users it's a lot sometimes. We have to stay uh, hugely respectful of that as well. Like you can't keep changing things around, but at the same time we understand where, we are ultimately trying to make it better. So for example, I'll tell you, 2 or 3 versions ago we had a home page where there were multiple entry points. It was, you go to, okay, here is your online ordering, here is search and discovery, here is something else. And then we moved away from that and we said, okay, land people to the ordering funnel, and then that became your home page. And then let them discover other through the tabs and bottom tabs and so on. But now we've added more categories. We will not be afraid of going back to that old style now if it makes more sense, because it does. So I think keeping that first principle thinking in mind, you shouldn't really be afraid of kind of experimenting, as long as you're very clear on 1 or 2 problems that you need to solve.
Sounds good, Rahul. Actually, the nice thing about this is that customer learning is actually intrinsic to your product. So that's what makes it a good uh, learning in a product too.
Yeah, and that's not to say that we don't make mistakes, or everything goes perfect all the time. Obviously not, right? But I think if you have processes built in where when that feedback can get to you quickly, like you have the pulse, and then you can adjust, iterate, fix it, and move forward.
Thanks, Rahul.
Santosh Guru.
Yeah. So thanks a lot, Rahul, for doing this. A big fan of Zomato's thoughtful use. So I've heard in one of your talks and also one of my colleagues saying that you specifically, uh, you value first principle based thinking rather than going with A/B testing or data driven thing. So, that really resonated with me. I wanted to know more on how did you build that, let's say, first principles? What are your foundation blocks, and what are your basic mental models in coming up with this first principles based thinking? Can you talk a little more? You just gave a hint about it in the previous question. Would love to hear more on that part. Thanks.
So I feel like there are two things, right? Again, A/B testing for what? Like if you're A/B testing, like should I build feature A versus should I build feature B? Then I feel like that's too expensive, and that I feel like sometimes makes people lazy because they all want to just hide behind data and then say, okay, the data says we should build feature B. So that is what I think you are kind of referring to. I might have said before. But if you want to test what is the best implementation of feature A, is it like this, or maybe there's a variant of this that could be better? We do that quite a lot. We understand we are not against A/B testing that part. Whereas like what's the most optimal um, version of a feature that we know is we've already decided to build. I don't know if that distinction is clear, but that's how kind of I think about it. But if you are thinking about, yeah, should we build A or B or C? That again, I go to first principles is like, are your goals clear to you? Do you understand your users well and how they use this? And do you understand the value that this will bring to the user's life? And do you have a sufficiently reasonable proxy to measure it via data, right? So if you are, clear on those things, then you should say, okay, A makes sense, we'll build it, and if it doesn't work, we'll fail, it's fine. But let's not spend time churning out like these A/B tests just to feel nice about it. Within A, you can A/B test. Okay, what's the best version of A? So that I'm okay with. But I think a lot of PMs should be more confident or back themselves when taking these intuitive calls.
Thank you.
Rahul, we have just a couple more questions. I hope it's okay with you for the time.
Yep, let's do 5 more minutes.
Ashwin?
Yeah, hi Rahul, thank you for your time. So my question is around government policies and decisions. So when you have some product roadmap already built, how do you factor in the policies which can suddenly hit you in the face and derail your product roadmap? Do you factor in those decisions,
No,
or?
I mean it would depend on the domain you are in, right? So if you're building, a missile, or if you're a defense contractor, or if you're building some hugely regulated industry, like you're in pharma or you're somewhere, then I'm guessing the process probably takes into account of some of that risk, uh, you know. But in a regular
Right.
consumer, like if in a business like ours, if you kind of started doing that, then you'll probably move very slow. So when I remember when demonetization happened,
Yeah,
we had like 1 million packages in Snapdeal which were en route, which were COD packages which were out for delivery, and nobody had cash. And then we had to kind of figure out how to get those delivered, right? But
yeah.
I don't know how anybody could have foretold that that might happen, and therefore you should have had a way to kind of preempt that somehow. I don't think we could have. So in our business, luckily, I don't think we see frequent disruption. There are some regulations from time to time which you have to adhere to, but I feel like it'll be overkill to kind of predict or make your roadmap be dependent on that.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Ankit?
Hi. So my question is, what percentage of your product features actually fail to reach statistical significance on North Star metrics? So you spoke about taking an intuition-driven approach to deciding which features to go and not go. And then the second approach was incremental in something which you have decided to build. So in this approach, which you suggest you take at Zomato, what percentage times you fail to reach and improve your North Star metrics?
So I don't think I have a number as such, but
A percentage?
if I had to kind of guess, I would say it'd be a fair amount of things. I feel like probably 20 to 30% of features, something, maybe 20%, I would say would not have an impact, which we can. And the good thing is that you need to understand that quickly and can them rather than, keep hoping that something magically will make them better.
Okay, so 80% are successful to
Yeah, I feel
reach.
like we don't, again, we are not a very, if you contrast that with Twitter, which probably had at some point at least 70, 80 A/B tests running at a given time. We are not because we don't do 100 A/B tests at a single time. We do on some backend systems where it's logistics optimization and so on and so forth, where it's algorithmic. So that's different. I'm not including that. But if you look at user consumer facing stuff, there we are pretty conservative in what we pick and intuition driven. So there's not a lot of such churn.
Okay. So, but don't you think that when you take a lot of intuition-driven decisions, at some time it get into seniority level? So somebody who is more senior, their opinion matter more than the somebody at a junior level, because if
Yeah,
it's
I
very
think
intuitive,
it's a
that's the
reality.
downfall, right?
It's no, it depends on how you manage it. I think there is obviously you can easily, then it becomes a top down thing, and your culture can easily kind of get drift towards that. Whoever has a larger title will decide what to build. So it's not entirely that. I think we, again, first principle thinking means that there is a decent amount of back and forth and asking and clarification on what the rationale is. I mean, even if you don't do A/B test, doesn't mean that you don't ask questions. Doesn't mean you pass that test of like logic and reason, and only then you can go ahead and do that. So if you are true to that, then you'll have lesser of those problems. But yeah, I mean, I can understand where that could become an issue if you don't manage it.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
So we have one last question from Shobhit.
Hi, Rahul sir. Thank you for your time. I have a quick question. Is that can you share a story with us wherein you overcame a product or a feature failure? As in, is there a feature that you really wanted to build, you and your team, but didn't end up building, and why?
I'm blank right now, but I think I mentioned a failure before when we talked about block on the first V1 of block on Twitter. But I'm sure there are a bunch more that really didn't do well. I launched Zomato's first loyalty program called Piggy Bank, and which was quite successful initially, and we ran it quite successfully for almost a year. But then we ran into but then that was again one of the decisions that we took to kind of can it, and we did can it, and that evolved into Gold, which was a much better kind of construct. But that was another story where we thought, that kind of a construct where we are letting people earn coins on every order, which they can then use on future orders, would be like a great kind of a platform level feature that most users will kind of appreciate. I think there was a fundamental flaw in that, you know, people started earning a lot of coins, but because their burn was kind of capped at 10% per order, over time they kind of the coins lost value, because I had like 10,000 coins, or users had like 50,000 coins, and they're like, okay, I have so many coins, but I can only burn like 50 to 100 coins an order. Therefore, so it became super inflated ecosystem where everybody had coins, but very little could be spent. So that was one of the features that over time we realized in this current construct will not work, and therefore we took the hard decision of canning it. But the learnings from all of that kind of became Gold, which then we launched to more success later.
Great, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Rahul. Any closing thoughts from you for all the creators who are attending this right now?
Closing thoughts. So I think, first of all, thank you. I hope it was useful. I know it's pretty late in the evening right now, but I'm great to see a budding community of product creators in India, and a lot of interest in product management now. and long it may continue. I wish you all the best, and I think we should stay connected. You should ping me on Twitter if you have any questions, any further. If you think my experience can help you guys in any way, answering further questions or going deeper into a specific problem, I can share my perspective. I don't claim to know the answers, but we can definitely brainstorm and figure out stuff. So feel free to ping me, and it was great talking to everybody.
So everyone, can we have a big round of applause for Rahul? Can we just unmute and thank you so much, Rahul.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul, so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you, DK.